Ṣẹ̀kẹ̀rẹ̀ lọ bá jó, ṣẹ̀kẹ̀rẹ̀ lọ bá jó, olúwa mi ò dìde ojú
The Ashen Forge. The Ashen Forge.
Hello, and welcome to the Ashen Forge. I am Phantom X, joined as always by Diggs and the legendary Neurotoxin. How are you two doing?
Great.
All right.
We had a week off. Anything exciting? For those who don't remember, it was Diggs' birthday. So
Yeah.
we have not asked his age, and we will not.
I'm old.
That's good enough.
Approximately Diggs years old.
I think I'm old enough to. I think Steven is like a year older than my godchild.
Wow.
Let's see.
Hmm.
I had a great birthday in DC. I got to squeeze in a couple of extra hours of dance classes and ended up playing Nintendo Switch with my best friend from high school. His nephew is staying with him for work while he looks for a house, and he and his siblings were playing Mario Kart. The funny thing about it is my best friend from high school was lamenting how his nephew never comes out of his room in the basement. He just comes home from work, goes in the basement, and they never see him. But he came out to play Mario Kart with me and his siblings. And I was thinking, well, if you just do stuff that he likes to do, then he'll come out. Like play games. Maybe if you played games, he'd come out and play with you. So
It's very true.
that was pretty fun.
Today I had to play Roblox with my daughter, ping pong with my wife, and Minecraft with my son. So
There you go.
Oh, there you go.
See how games strengthen the family bond.
yeah. I've been jumping into Lord of the Rings online this weekend. There's actually been quite a bit to go on. Seed had some testing, Pantheon had some testing, New World's doing its thing. I even downloaded Ultima Online just because I was curious. I walked around for about 15 minutes and haven't been able to get back. But anyways.
I did play a little bit of New World, but I haven't done very much.
I logged in, looked around, had, every which direction, run 100 or 1 kilometer, whatever, run a long ways this way and that way to go do your quests. I was like, I just don't have the energy for this shit. I might log. It was just, I might log back in and go to a new little settlement somewhere else and just kind of start over. Or as Terradin tells us, is just wait for the next. It's not expansion, but the revamp of the starting area.
It's an update, something. Those quests that I was doing did have me running fairly far across the map. I was running into more people than the last time I played, so it seems like it's not barren, it's not underpopulated. Of course, they probably merged a bunch of servers, but I was running into quite a few people, so that was kind of fun to see.
But we are here for Ashes of Creation. They just had their live stream on Friday. Hope Steven is doing well and his family for whatever has come up. But we got to see, actually, almost felt a little bit like let down because the month before was just so full of stuff. But I think still some pretty valuable things to kind of talk about. So the Ranger reveal, I think, was the big part of this. So anyone have any initial thoughts?
Yeah, that airstrike. The rules lawyer in me immediately wants to ask questions. For example,
Wait,
don't
wait.
you interrupt me.
No, I want you to describe what airstrike is first. What is airstrike, so everybody knows?
So if anybody who saw the stream would have seen this thing that happens where the ranger will jump in the air, shoot multiple times, and then land facing the other way from the other symbiote. Probably not.
Can they move some distance? Do they move some distance?
Yeah,
Or-
they clear a fairly decent, like an arc over them. And so I ask, first, if I'm on a low surface and there is a higher surface, do I get up there? Second, do I have to be on the ground, or can I fire it off while I'm in the air? And then third, what's it do about fall distance? If I decide I want to quickly get down from a cliffside, can I just do an airstrike and I'll just, ride it down and shooting arrows the entire time? Or what are all of the details to it? Is it going to have an edge guard so you can't go over a cliff? Will it have that same edge guard to prevent me from falling into lava or something like that? There's so much about it that for just being one ability, immediately I think about what are all the ways that people are going to utilize it, min-max, exploit, try to counter it, all that sort of fun stuff.
Well, it's risk versus reward. So, I mean, it's a risk that you might fall into lava, or you might take fall damage from falling over a cliff if you don't. If you don't.
Oh no, I'm not.
Right.
I'm not asking if that's.
I'm saying that has to be the answer, right?
No,
Risk
it doesn't.
Reward.
What I'm saying is the ability set to terminate the safe falling distance at a certain point, at which any further you go from there will now start counting as falling damage. Or if you use that from a high distance to go down to a much lower area, will it shield you from taking the falling damage? Because
I know, I'm saying the answer has to be risk versus reward. It's the risk.
It doesn't have to be risk versus reward. That can be a class kit thing. That's a special thing that Rangers get to do that other people don't. It's like, oh, gotta get down real fast. Great. Well, maybe they have some ability where they stake down a rope and then you fire that off to get down the cliff, and then you stake it down somewhere else and people can, shimmy down or whatever.
But safety is not one of the pillars.
What pillars?
Well.
Okay, safety is not one of the pillars, my ass.
That's a different game. Yeah.
D&D games. Okay, what are the two things that take the longest time? One is combat, because it's a long and drawn out sort of thing, dilation of time. Two, trying to get through any single room in a dungeon where you think there might be a trap or treasure. And so that safety pillar is definitely there. It's been from the start. You don't just go marching in like Leroy Jenkins. You gotta, watch what you're doing. You gotta think ahead and be safe and, find ways to do things safely. Just because it's not part of the Trinity doesn't mean it isn't, part of the way you play the game.
Yeah, so pillars is a loaded question, and Diggs fought me on Discord, because when you go to the wiki, I got tired of seeing this risk versus reward constantly being talked about everywhere, and it's always used only in the context of open world PvP. That is the fallback excuse to why, and this really stemmed out of their dev discussion on the harvester that gets ganked, basically. And everyone, well, it's risk versus reward. If you're going to harvest in the world, you're going to have, we're going way off on a tangent here, but I'm just pointing out that when you go to the wiki, actually, the listed pillars, development pillars, there's 5 of them, actually were created pre-Kickstarter. Kickstarter had 4 different ones. And Diggs is going to argue with me that they kind of overlap, and they do a little bit, but risk versus reward is always in the context of open world PvP. The PvP pitched in the Kickstarter was very specific in caravans, node sieges, guild wars, very specific description. And I feel like it was just not exactly what's been done now. But anyways, and it's not so much about evolution of the game, it's the fact that that I was unaware there were 5 different pillars put out there a month or two before. But I will stop on that tangent. We can go right back to, that's probably a different show. We can go right back to the Ranger. So that's a good point. I actually never thought about using their skills as a way to sort of traverse the landscape.
Immediately, the first sort of thing that I thought of with it was, action RPG made in New Zealand.
We did that with Landmark. We also did it in Apocalypse too.
Path of Exile. That's the one I was thinking. Yeah. You know the one. It's an ARPG that's made in New Zealand. It's grindy gear games. Everybody loves them.
Yeah, but we've been able to use stuff like that in other ARPGs. Use a weapon to help us progress longer or jump farther. Or all that
yeah,
stuff.
those abilities have existed forever.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's why I'm saying I think it's more of one of those features. I think the risk reward you're looking at is did that dude who has the battle MacGuffin just go off that cliff with his ability? I'm not going to be able to chase him. Ooh, that's going to be a nasty fall. Someone else is going to have to go get him. I'm going to return to another part of the battle. You know, that's the sort of like,
that'd be great. That'd be awesome.
Yeah.
Maybe that's what the grappling hook is for. To retrieve them. Yeah, but that's part of what testing is for. So we'll have to see in Alpha 2. People will certainly try it. We'll have to see if it gets nerfed.
So my sort of immediate thoughts on the Ranger was I actually thought it looked quite fun. I didn't see any major issues running around shooting, but it did seem very different from the melee that we saw, the sort of up close combat, and which was largely seemed to be AOE based, right? A lot of sort of packs of mobs were getting taken down, and in this instance, it was much more single target process. Now we only saw two skills in the basic auto attack, basically. So I mean, we saw very little. What was it? Snipe, the one you described, the air assault, and then I think just the auto attack, and then the differences between longbow and shortbow. So we didn't see much, but there were very different presentations.
It was the exact same difference between the longsword and the daggers, but the ranged weapon equivalent. And I think that's approximately what we expected, where they all use this, same similar sort of abilities. But the daggers are meant to be ultra fast, ultra mobile, while on the entire other end of the spectrum, the big old greatsword is supposed to be the slowest but the longest reach. And so just as they wanted to show those two polar opposites, like here's the spectrum we're working with, so too did they do that with the bow and the short bow and the long bow.
Mm-hmm.
What goes in and elsewhere around that range, who knows? Maybe a crossbow has higher mobility, but has kind of a long load time to it.
I felt there was a bigger difference between daggers and greatsword than between longbow and shortbow. I didn't really see much of a difference, but
well, with the longbow, there wasn't nearly not as much running around, and it didn't feel as good to run around. Also, it was hard to tell because he backed into a bunch of stuff, and rule number one of being a ranger trying to kite things, you know where you're going to be kiting the things ahead of time. Otherwise, you don't do that. Now, I will also pause on that and say this was not a demonstration of top-notch gameplay. That's not what this was supposed to be. Because if that was the case, it'd more likely be hit with the bows till they get close and then press the button to switch to your melee kit and start bashing it, which I think is more what intended gameplay, especially for a solo player, would be.
Well, also, like Steven said, he always has an idea of how it's going to go, and it never goes like it.
Yes.
his plans. So
I liked their Tyson quote. That's always a good quote. Everyone has a plan until they get punched in the face.
hmm
It was funny watching him run around and scream "no, no, no" as he died over and over and over again.
hmm
And then gave the excuse of, well, we have to do this, otherwise I have to stop, and it's not fun. What's that show? Your players that want to play Ranger if you're dying that many times.
I still go back to none of what we're seeing right now is in any way balanced whatsoever. All of these are just functional models that use their tools that put everything in the right way, and they work, but they're not like great. Like if he made it that they all take, let's say the longbow does 2 damage and the short bow does 1 damage, and all the enemies have like 3 to 7 health. Well, he's going to be putting them down at about the same rate. It's not going to be as interesting. I mean, you're going to see him kill this stuff. It's like, oh, look at that. Steven's actually winning. Yeah. But then the enemies are going to be dying too fast, and we won't be able to see, enough of a demonstration of that side of things.
Theater Elf says, consider how much XP debt he must have accrued, and I would love that for that to be on the Yui when he is playing.
That's hilarious.
That was the nice thing, though. I don't remember us actually seeing the Yui in the last one, in the melee demo. So this one, actually getting to see the stuff on the bar, I liked that. I don't know if that was like an oversight that they meant to not show it, but it was nice to actually see it, on the bar as if somebody was actually playing the game and not like, this totally neutralized, like I've got a screen over here with all the data and everything, and here's just the stream, which, by the way, is something that I would really like to have, is the ability to stream gameplay on this screen and gameplay with UI on this screen, or maybe do it the other way. So I'm looking at the one with the UI, but I can record it maybe as like a virtual screen and then capture that. So if I wanted to get gameplay that's action packed and shows the environment and you get the sounds and sights and everything going on, but you don't want to have the UI to make the pretty video less pretty, and B, don't want to reveal to people what's going on in live gameplay, then having that kind of virtual UI-less second monitor capture sort of thing would be fantastic. I'm pretty sure it's something you can do with that engine, because you can just hack about anything you want into it. That'd be
that would be cool.
Something I've asked for at least a decade. I don't think too many people have done it. And I don't know why. It's great at conventions. You just have this big screen of somebody playing around in the world doing something cool. It's like, wow, that video is really cool. Is that the trailer? No, bro, that's live gameplay. What? I mean, that's the thing you're trying to do at a convention. I don't know who's doing conventions anymore.
Yeah, the UI stuff. I'm trying to remember the name of the tower, the vertical dungeon, and it was but when they walked into the area, and the flash of the new zone or new spot that they're at looked really nice too. I don't know why that caught my eye, but I guess, like as you're saying, just starting to see some of the more polished UI stuff's nice to. I want to see what that tower's like. But.
Well, I'm really hoping Alpha 2 will be long enough that we can actually see all of the world, the much larger world in Alpha 2 as it kind of changes through the different states, because that'll be really nice to see, but it's probably going to take a little effort to actually go around everywhere and really be able to see a lot of this and that and the other, and not just get mauled at the entrance.
Oh, I have a feeling Alpha 2 is going to go for quite a long while. We'll see. Actually, one of the questions I think was about if you're playing stealth, will you be able to hide your nameplate or somehow present yourself differently? And I think the answer was, well, we've been talking about it, and we're talking about that with ships and other things, but we aren't really sure yet. And it's like, wow, we're going to be in Alpha 2 for a little bit.
Well, what was interesting about that is he didn't mention stealth. He mentioned disguises.
Mm.
So there's because I think what the question was whether you can turn off your nameplate, and the answer was different, that you can disguise who you are, which means that implies that your nameplate would still be visible. So that doesn't really help with stealth, but people won't know who you are, and I'm wondering how that changes corruption and enemy of the state, and if you're in a guild war, like what ramifications are there? What else does the disguise do?
And do we get to
change your
do
name?
like a saving throw to see if we see through the disguise or recognized, for whatever,
I would
that
expect there to be counters that you can invest in to see through disguises, but
some sort of skill.
Mhm.
Or maybe it just knocks off real fast. So it's like, hey, I'm going to hit you and then I'm going to heal you. It's like, huh, what?
I can see the
disguise
shit part. Like that I can understand. Like you want to somehow be able to disguise what you're carrying or how much. I can see where that would make sense. I feel like
Oh, go ahead.
I was gonna say I feel like giving players the ability to somehow disguise or hide themselves when you're in an entirely open PvP area world is just like adding fuel to the fire, basically, unless you're limited in where you can use it.
There's our answer. I just realized it. So with the way stealth was presented for enemies in Alpha 1 was that the enemy was visible, but you couldn't tab target it and you couldn't see its nameplate until it engaged with you. There was a very specific Sladeborn camp where the one kind of in that canyon with the river going through it and the camp on the other side, the friendly camp. That enemy camp on the other side employed that rather heavily. And I could see how in the tab target based system, that would be a disadvantage. You know that person's there. You can see them coming, but you have a hard time targeting them directly and have to use an AoE if you want to try to attack them because they are in stealth. Versus somebody who is an action player might just be able to aim that direction, take a shot, and if it doesn't hurt you, well, then you must be my buddy. And if it does hurt you, well, I know what the hell you are. So that could be part of the trade-off for how stealth works and how action versus tab targeting. The advantage you get for playing action is perhaps that you can do things like that. You see it, you shoot it, even if you can't target it, sort of stuff.
Well, that sort of brings us we're talking about the title of the show, Tab Targeting Tiers. So, discussing the hybrid system. This obviously is much more clear example than again of the dual wielding daggers and things we saw. So, what are your thoughts on this sort of a system?
Yeah, it's what I would expect to see.
Yeah, it looked fine. I want to play so I can feel the difference between action and tab target. I think also for me, action combat is not just about your targeting, but how you're responding. So a lot of action for me is how I'm dodging or rolling or blocking attacks. How am I getting away from those action hits? How am I defending against them? And I don't think we really saw very much of that in this demo. And then, yeah, I would just have to play through the abilities to figure out whether I like the feel of tab target versus the feel of ranged and when. So it was okay. I think they were supposed to be showing more tab target in this demo because they showed more action in the last one, even though that's a little counterintuitive, I think. But yeah, I don't know. It looked fine.
I get the feeling that it's going to be a lot more tab targeting with skills and tab targeting with range stuff, but there might be a fair amount of close combat stuff where you're just blasting through large areas and trying to hit multiple enemies at once, where a tab targeting system where you turn and face one enemy and hit them, you're going to miss everybody else, versus being able to kind of split the distance between 2 or 3 targets a little bit more effectively and be able to continue doing that on the fly instead of having to juggle tab targets to keep hitting them as effectively as possible. I think that's where you're going to really see a lot more of the action combat. And I don't think it's going to be something where it feels weird. I think people are going to enjoy that when they try to do a ranged attack, it's more likely going to hit because it's the computer, doing the shot for you. And I don't know if there's going to be any client to server, total server side difference between taking a tab target shot versus manually firing the shot. But I wonder if it's something that will potentially compute and calculate a little faster because it knows who's shooting from where and when. It isn't waiting for somebody to activate the shooting action.
Yeah, I mean, I also kind of felt it was weird to have this snipe ability, but not show how it might actually be used. I think most rangers would be sniping from a hidden position some distance away, and then how easy it is for you to find that person who is sniping. So I like the idea that the concept behind it of drawing for a longer time, I think, and then doing more damage. But one, I would want to see if I was using snipe, I would probably want to be stealthed and some distance away. But also on the other end of that, I'm a little trepidatious about how easy it is to find the sniper. I think that was kind of an issue in Apocalypse. People could snipe you from fairly far away, and it would be kind of difficult to figure out where they were sniping you from. But
So I was putting this in the chat. I was a little thrown off by the soft and hard target locks for action combat. I'm so used to you're trying to get something in that reticle, but with this, as you're sort of moving across the monster, like it will show up and then it will fade away, or you can hard target it, which I can understand some of the people's frustration that loved action combat. I think some of the questions were, can I turn that off? Which I don't think is an unreasonable question. I do think it's unreasonable to say, well, this, we shouldn't have hybrid make everyone do action. But that kind of caught me off guard a little bit. But for me, I'm probably a terrible aim, so it will help me out. But I also wonder how much, because in part of the Q&A after was a question about some of the skills, whether you had to have a target in order to use them. And the answer, of course, is yes for some. And in that sense, I think it obviously makes sense that they'd have to add in some sort of hard or soft lock for skill use. So.
Or it'll just pick whoever, and that's just what it's going to do. And if it's not the person you wanted, well, you should have been action target.
I also like the freeform sort of being able just to fire off into the distance. That seemed fun. I was imagining, being on a ship or something like that and just trying to anticipate where your opponents were going to be, firing at them. Because it sounds like they're going to largely be on the top surface, right? There's not going to be. That was another question as to whether there'd be anything within the ship, and it sounds like to decorate, I think, was the question. But the answer was, we're really trying to keep you above board, just to make it easier for combat perspective. So sounds fun to me.
Shooting cannons out the sides with little boards that you open up.
I'm looking forward to. I'm curious what sort of healing abilities. I always think of the classic sort of EQ Ranger, which was rarely played actually, but when played well, was really a pretty kick-ass class to play. So hopefully that shows up here.
Talk about that a little bit more, because you mentioned healing and then kind of dropped off. So
Well, you just don't. My days in EQ, you just didn't see many people play Ranger. There was, and I'm not entirely sure as to why, but they had a significant healing component. So often you would utilize them in a raid or something to sit back. They drop their damage and your healers were low on mana. They'd just kind of spot heal, help you out with some of the sort of role support role kind of things. And when done very well, was a very good class. But you just saw so few people use it. So
D&D usually has healing for Rangers. So I would not be surprised that that was a thing for EQ, and I would expect it would have been a thing in Pathfinder. Though I haven't played Pathfinder, and Ashes is based on Pathfinder, but doesn't Ranger fall under Martial? Our Martial archetypes are
They're like a half
Ranger.
caster.
Huh?
Are you talking about D&D, or are you talking about?
No. In Ashes, though, I think Ranger falls under the 4 martial archetypes. Is it Ranger, Rogue, Fighter, Tank? Those are our 4 martial.
Oh, that sounds about right.
And then Arcane is Bard, Cleric, Mage, and Summoner. Yeah, so I think Ranger falls under. So I'm guessing they probably won't in Ashes have a healing component. Although if you want that, then you would just grab Cleric as a secondary archetype, or Bard as a secondary archetype.
They probably have some self-healing, maybe some like nature-y or medicine-y sort of heal sort of stuff. That's my guess.
And
I mean, what is a ranger other than some variant of Aragorn from Lord of the Rings? Because I feel like that's like the archetype for what the ranger has been going forward.
Yeah.
So
and
he's got that elf magic, but a human beard and whatever.
Yeah. And you were not competing with a cleric for heals. I guess I should clarify that a little bit more in EQ. It was very much, you were below druids. I mean, you were, but it was helpful. If you had someone sitting back dropping DPS and then you needed something extra. T-Elf mentions too, and I thought this was a great change to the sort of classic approach to the Ranger, was the removal of arrows, having to make and buy them. I thought that actually sounds like a breath of fresh air.
Although I still want quivers.
Oh, that's something that I would like to have, is not necessarily that you have to deal with ammo, and this is something that I've wondered about, but that your bow and your quiver are 2 parts of the whole, that you're going to be equipping a bow and you're going to be equipping the thing that you're drawing the infinite arrows from, but both of them have their stat blocks and their potential abilities and modifiers. It could very well be the sort of thing where you're getting some of the, half the functionality comes from one part and half the functionality comes from the other. If it's going to have an elemental effect of some sort, maybe that's on the quiver. If it's going to have a certain attribute that drives the damage that it does, that's probably going to be on the ranged weapon. So that's what I'm kind of guessing is going to happen. They might split things up and then have bow and quiver, and then that's accessing woodwork and leathercraft and whoever makes bowstrings, leathercraft, I would imagine. Different crafting disciplines and routes in and out for materials to the to make the ranged equipment. I would imagine everybody's going to have some sort of ranged equipment. It seems like they kind of want everybody to have a melee and a range that they swap between.
Yeah, I do that part I like too. I liked their approach to, and its skills too, not being limited. You know, if you'll have your melee weapons and then you'll have your range and you'll be able to just to freely kind of use either based off the skill. I think that's rather than limiting you to one, and then you're in combat, you can't flip flop to a different weapon here, even though it's equipped, like, which never makes sense. So, like, well, it's at my hip. Why can't I grab it?
I'm also curious to see which ranger skills are tied to the bow, meaning that you have to have a bow in order to be able to use them, and which aren't. Similar to shield bash, you'll need a shield to do shield bash specifically, but that's, I guess, for tank. But there's other abilities that you won't need a shield for. So with the ranger, that just makes me curious. I think one of the ones, there's one that we saw, I forget what it is. It like jumps you back, like you attack and then you're able to spring back or something like that. I don't know if you need a bow specifically to be able to do that. But I'm curious where that will fall in.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm reading something. Anyways, Rangers, anything else? Or range combat?
I think what we're seeing now is maybe we're seeing some of the stuff that's going to be in Alpha 2, yes, but for how it's actually going to be used in gameplay by players in real situations, like I had said earlier, don't think about the stuff we're seeing in the streams as being like that, because this is just a demonstration how the weapons work. Doesn't matter how well the gameplay is going. It's mostly just a demo, what they've got cooking and all that sort of stuff. I think the tab targeting thing is something that people are going to really not have a full ability to grasp until they've played it for themselves and they felt it for themselves. And until then, we have opinions, we have preferences, but how it's actually going to feel and how it's actually going to play out, it's really hard to tell until we actually get to play it.
And I don't think any of us have actually talked about being a ranger main. Just answering the question in chat, I will say after seeing this, I'm more interested in giving it a shot. Definitely during Alpha 2. I have always, in my mind, my character now, Diggs has a bunch of alts, so we'll see what comes up from him on this. But
if I play,
you'll have alts in Alpha 2.
That's true.
I always sort of imagined a paladin, but that was more of a role-playing sort of process, from just watching the gameplay. I certainly will give this a try for when I'm out, off the farm, so to speak. Seems like a pretty viable process for a solo player, just to sort of scope things out. We also don't know about tracking and stuff like that. I would assume there's some sort of process or ability to track players and mobs alike, which would be nice if you're a solo artist. So.
And yeah, I do plan to play Nakua Ranger, actually. that is my plan for launch.
I would need to see the stealth abilities. If Ranger has stealth, what kind of stealth it has. And it might be that I would play something like a Predator Rogue Ranger in order to maximize stealth, but we'll have to see.
Well, a rogue is an assassin.
Ranger rogue sounds fun too.
Yeah, there's the scout and predator.
Yeah.
The predator's the rogue ranger and the scout's the ranger rogue, which I think Scout is what I'm looking for because ultimately I'm really interested in having the mobility stuff. I know of the group, we all know Diggs is the big explorer, but I like getting around too. I definitely like shortcutting. It's one of those things that's terrible. I played so much Warframe. Every game I go into, I'm trying to do like the ultra bullet jump and air glide and all that. It's like, what the hell am I doing? I've got these like controls baked into my memory that I've got to stop for a moment. It's like, no, that's not how you get around. That's not even how you move in this game. Just chill. This is a slow game. This is not, play at a million miles a second, super fast-paced space ninja combat. Not a sponsor.
Well,
But that's yeah.
Phantom just posted something in chat. I don't plan on a ton of combat, which reminds me of the Twitter question, and I don't even remember looking up the answer or what the answer response was. And it was something like two rangers encounter each other, and what was it? Do you shoot or
You take the quick shot or you wait and take the long one?
yeah?
And,
how do you approach it?
Yeah.
My answer
And I'm
was
pretty
the best.
sure you were going to win either way, whichever one you picked, but they went with the wait for the better shot one, and that was the win.
No, my
And
go ahead. I forget exactly what I said.
my answer was I would just stealth around them.
Yeah.
No one's gonna know. How they're gonna know? I would just stealth them.
It was an enemy ranger stands between you and exploring the rest of the Varan deserts. In classic fashion, you both prepare for a duel. What would you do? My answer was in classic fashion, I keep on my mount and forge ahead. The ranger will eventually reset.
Nice.
Yeah.
All right. Well, if we are done with range and ranger, I do want to sort of talk about, we only got about 15 more minutes. And this was brought up during the live session a little bit, this gathering and PvP dev discussion. Because this triggered a lot of conversation. And I'm assuming all of us know what was asked, but the original question basically was, well, they've rephrased it. And so I don't know what it originally was. They changed it in the forum. But now it says artisan gatherers will be prime targets for combatant players. With that said, what tools or activities would gatherers like to see to help protect their hard-earned materials while adventuring in Vera? The way it was, and that I think has been rephrased, because essentially the way it was originally phrased was like, it was basically saying go out and kill your gatherers. It was just a weird phrase question, and a lot of people were upset that the PvPers were getting upset that the question seemed to be implying they were going to change somehow this sort of open PvP scenario or somehow protect the gatherers, and that's why they ended up rephrasing the question. But
Say that again about protecting the gatherers.
The way the original question was phrased, it was in a way that seemed to imply they were considering or asking for ways to give more balance to the gatherer than the PvE player that was going to come up and steal their stuff, basically. And so the PvP crowd, I think, took that to mean that their pillar was, that's where these pillars and the damn risk versus reward that I get tired of hearing kept coming up. Was, well, your pillar is risk versus reward. Why would you protect them? It's their risk for gathering. It's me out there to kill them. And so they clarified that that's not what they were asking about. It was more what would gatherers like to be able to, how would they like to protect themselves? Yeah, and CL puts, it was encouraging ganking gatherers. Yes, that is essentially what it came down to of how it was originally questioned. So
yeah, I didn't understand the question, so
it just seems like an odd question to ask when you're trying to keep your PvE players interested and in the game after you've already sort of announced, some changes in thought to like corruption and your friends being able to remove that from you after you just talked about open seas PvP being free for all. And then to follow that up with a post about ganking gatherers, it just seems like, are you really trying to keep? That's why I still say I think they finally made a decision on what population of players they're aiming at. I think that's pretty clear at this point, but everyone's just silent.
No, I think the way that crafters are gonna have to, or the gatherers are gonna have to deal with it, is find their own solutions. Honestly, one for example, always go out with other people. The rate of finding the materials out in the wild compared to how quickly they could be harvested, at least in Alpha 1, was so completely off balanced that a group of 5 people literally only needs one gatherer and the other 4 can protect them, because there's only going to be about enough material for, you know, that sparse a gathering that you'll clear the enemies, you'll get 2 things, and then you go on to the next one, you clear enemies, maybe you'll get 3 rocks this time, maybe you'll get to bang on it twice instead of once. But it's not, it was very sparse. There were a lot of fits and spurts, especially when the servers were up for a while. It seemed like areas that were more commonly hit up, the stuff kind of depleted from, and wherever they were spawning, and we're ending up on some giant list or whatever array, probably, of where all the nodes are at, was places that players weren't actually going whatsoever. So they never get gathered, never repopulate other places. So until the server reset, they would just get more and more sparse unless you knew exactly where the things kind of built up. That was the feeling of it, at least. I would hope and imagine that A2 is going to be completely different than that. But the other one I think of is probably more the one that I would do is, you go out as light as possible, trying to keep only the minimum stuff on you. And if you're out gathering solo and a bunch of people surround you and, they start attacking you, just press the dance button and just keep dancing. You got one key that just does /dance for you. You just press that button over and over, and then you're dead. And then they all have corruption because you didn't fight back and you were dancing, and they clearly know that dancing is what you do if you're not going to fight back and give them corruption. And so you just dance. Everybody dance, and just make it a thing you do on the server. If you're going to gank that person, go ahead. You're gonna get punished for it too. They're going to be dancing, and they're going to tell people, "Hey, this is where I'm dancing. Get your pitchforks out."
But what's frustrating about this too, which is sort of like kicking someone when they're down, is that if you don't fight back, you lose more of your materials.
And you punish them.
You lose less if you go ahead and fight back, even though you're going to die.
Yeah,
most likely.
You're gonna lose something anyway. But this way, if you just dance it out, they have been slapped with corruption. They now have a target on their back, which is going to be an inconvenience. At the very least, at the worst, will result in them losing their ill-gotten gains from you and anyone else along the way. So just dance.
Depending on
if you dance, the next gatherer will also be saved. Or they'll have some indication that the person is coming with corruption, be like, "Oh crap, that dude's actually like red, I'm out of here." And be able to see them from further away.
Depending on how hard it is to work off the experience that I may have found my new form of fast travel. So, especially when I'm on the ocean.
It depends on where it sends you. I still don't understand the question really, because they seem to be thinking that there will be people who just that the gatherers will be people who don't PvP. And I have a feeling that's not going to be the case. I think that the gatherers are going to be PvPers who want to gather. There really aren't going to be very many PvEers. especially when you phrase questions like this. But
Well, now,
other than what they've other than what they've told us so far, which is corruption, what are some other options that people and mules? What are the options that people have for tools or activities that are going to protect their? Because I don't know, I can't even conceive of what those would be. Doesn't seem like there's any tools or activities that will prevent that. So you tell us. But
well,
it seems to me that the farther they go and the more they focus on risk versus reward, the fewer artisan gatherer PvEers that they have,
oh yeah,
there will be. It's going to be PvPers who also choose to do artisan and gathering stuff.
but here was my I agree with you. Here was my thought on this: is we keep talking about risk versus reward, and generally in this scenario, the gatherer is just accepting that they're going to get killed. That's just what's going to happen. You're just accepting that, and you're going to lose half of your stuff. And so that's your risk. And I guess the PvP player's risk is that they'll turn red, but they have ways to get out, get that out, right? They can go kill things or have someone kill them. And the gatherer themselves has just lost everything. Like there's no there's no way to earn that back. You just have to go back out and put the time in again, versus the PvP corruption component. So my thought was, okay, well then let's add some risk to the PvP player. So why not create a system where your gatherers, your refiners, your crafters, anyone that has a product that they sell, that they are allowed to create a blacklist, and that they can place these PKers on a blacklist, that they are no longer going to ever be able to buy their items, whether at an auction house, whether from a third party. If I sell it to Diggs could not sell it to someone on my blacklist. And that is sort of their risk, that, okay, I went out and ganked you, I took half your logs. Oops, I didn't realize that you're the only one that can make the sword that I really want, but now I can't purchase it because I'm on your list because I did that's their risk. I would absolutely love to see something like that. And that would be I think you would make that family wide, potentially account wide. And that's the risk of being a PKer. I would actually be incredibly happy. I would be perfectly fine if I was out gathering mushrooms, someone killed me, and I knew that I could put them on some list that they just never would be able to buy anything from me ever again. And that was it. Like a do not call list. I would be happy.
That would
with
really make it helpful to have some sort of like journal that tracks those things. So then you could actually have some sort of reviewable and recallable evidence. If it's like, oh, well, you're accusing this person. Well, do you have the wheres and whens of it? Because I could imagine people then being baited into combat, then the person intentionally loses, they die, they have this thing on the list. It's like, nope, that person ganked me. See, I have I
just treat it like Ultima.
Well, it reminds me of the Enemies of the State, which is based on reputation. So there's already some kind of mechanism for something similar in that. The design.
It'd be a pop-up box. Ultima Online, you got ganked. You could, do you want to, report this player for whatever their, prison system was at the time? And yes, it'd be the same. Do you want to place this person on your blacklist? Yes. And I think that's fair. I think that's an absolutely fair approach, that if your content, the way you're going to get your items is to go kill a gatherer, then okay, but you have to be aware that you might not be able to purchase things from them either because you just stole from them. I think it's fair.
There's aspects of it. I get you. There's a way to work that through, I think.
I asked that question. The response I got was that was not a planned feature. So I will be asking that again at Steven's AMA, and I expect it to not get answered. So.
Well, we should have him on the show at some point again next year. So
yeah, definitely. I would imagine after Alpha 2, maybe during Alpha 2, would probably be a pretty good time, so there's, a lot more to talk about.
Yep.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was just saying, Grumpy Guy, talking about PBX. the distinct feeling that I get from a lot of people, is that this feels more PvP than PvX. That at least in the last 3 or 4 months, and Diggs, am I wrong in interpreting this? That because you're do a lot of conversation with the PvE crowd, is that there just seems to have been a pretty clear pendulum swing away from PvE with more of a focus. Now, maybe that's just because that's what we've been seeing in the live streams, and so there's a skewed viewpoint right now. But
I no longer really think that PvX means much because, again, to me right now, it seems like it's a PvP-centric game, and PvX means that PvPers will have to do some PvE. That's what PvX seems to me.
And everyone, Grumpy Guy, everyone mentions the open sea as though it's not a big deal. It is the bulk of the content of the world. They talk about 1,200 kilometer, whatever, square kilometers, like 760 something of that's sea. The land size actually didn't increase that much. So when you now put a blanket free for all, and we know that there's content in there, treasure, mobs, that's, I think, so it's not, well, it was just the open sea. It's well, no, that's a big chunk of content. And that's why PvE players, I think, are getting a little bit frustrated with the process, because it isn't just open seas. There's a lot more to it.
Here's a question I have. Do we know if ships can essentially party up with each other when they're out on the open sea?
Sorry, what?
Say that again? Yeah, say that again.
Can ships party up with each other when they're out on the open sea? That is, I see another ship and it's like, oh, hey, I am going to fly hey, let's team up and smash some Kraken's flag. And you get close. And then, communicate with them, however, or, long distance or magic or blowing horns or whatever to communicate that, hey, yeah, you guys down the clown, let's go smash some stuff. And then you party up. And then, of course, Steven would say, well, there's always risk in who you party with. And if before the encounter ends, they unparty and, finish you off because you're low,
I think you can do that. It sounds like making allies, and
because he's made comments about taking a armada of ships out of your own. Actually, I was curious when I don't know if that was just stated incorrectly, but the way I think this was the last. Well, actually, when he was talking about open seas, he mentioned that your armada. So it sounded as though you could deploy multiple ships of your own. Which I thought
maybe he means your in terms of like a guild, not an individual.
Maybe, but I also think it would make sense if you could own multiple ships and let someone else use it. Just the same as you can let someone on your freehold, you can probably let someone be on your ship.
Honestly, I hope there's NPC ships out there that we can capture and haul back, kind of like that Sid Meier's Pirates. And then you've got a bonus ship in reserve, and that's kind of how you get your extra ships.
Well, it's 9:00. Diggs, you got something else to say? It looks like.
Yeah, I was just going to say that it seems to me that the answer that people might be looking for, Grumpy Guy kind of mentions it in the chat, is that gatherers will group with PvPers to protect them while they're out gathering. But I think that's a solution that PvPers think is a viable solution, that PvEers don't have the same thing. I mean, one, if I'm not going to PvP, I'm not going to have other people PvP for me. If I'm not in the mood for PvP, I don't want to be involved at all. And that means I don't want to have the people around me PvPing. If I'm going to have, I don't want people protecting me so that I don't have to do PvP. I'm just not interested in PvP.
All you need is an empty revolver. Like, you just need something that you can point and say, hey, you don't know if this is loaded or not, but do you really want to come over and find out? And if they say, no, it's like, all right, well, the empty revolver does its job again. It's just enough to make them think, well, this is probably not going to be worth our effort.
Yeah.
I think most gatherers, it's more of a laid back process, right? It's something you do because you enjoy just sort of cruising the world, clicking, seeing what you get, maybe get a rare, looking forward to bringing it back. So your thought process isn't, okay, I got to get a group of 5 people so that they can stand around, because then it takes too long.
Exactly. Yeah.
I think part of what's going to help people is trying to use the aesthetic system and being able to get things made in a custom appearance that looks as drab and downtrodden and basic as possible, regardless of what tier it's at, because the hope is, no, I'm not this shiny gold-plated unicorn elf that surely has the nicest materials on me. I might be level 40, but I'm still just this haggard poor working class fighter here, and I'm just banging away on the ore. Don't mind me. And trying to do that, be less visually appealing to try to not stand out as a target, sort of thing. Will that work? Will people do it? I don't know. I think some people might. I could see Diggs just doing that anyway, having a character that wears like mostly rags and like tattered stuff. It's, dude, that is a level 60 tattered shirt you're wearing. That is awesome. It's like, yep, custom made.
Yeah, my main in EQ2 only wore rags. They wore starter rags, and the gear that they could wear was jewelry and weapons, and that was it. So I'd have my 80 level character only in rags, and people would be like, what are you doing? That's role playing.
My original
character flaw.
Yeah, and see, so this is actually good. My original answer to this question was much more sort of in a mental psychology sort of basis of this idea of immersion, that because a lot of the posts through the PvP crowd were also, well, it's more immersive if I can just pray on, go hunt somebody and you're going to break the immersion, blah blah blah. And most of the time when people are talking of immersion, they're actually referring to what would be called flow, sort of that state where it's a flow state. You're sort of in the zone, time passes. It's when you start a game at 10, next thing you know, it's 3 a.m. and you just do not remember time passing, right? And so, everyone experiences that different. The idea that, PvEers and PvPers experience that in the same way, in the same rate, is just not true. So the balance that you're getting is, yes, in this scenario, your PvP player is probably going to reach a flow state. It's what they like. It's a balance of skill and challenge. And in that scenario, usually their skill is going to come out higher than the challenge. And so they're going to feel a positive effect. Whereas the PvE player, PvP is not their skill. That's not why they're there. So, the challenge for them is in the harvesting crafting side. So if they're going to have to fight, that's going to actually pull them further away from flow and a flow state, immersion. And eventually the opposite of flow is anxiety, is bored. Eventually they're just going to leave because there's just no fun. There's no fun in it. And I don't think people completely grasp that.
Right, and that's an interesting thing because in that last in the August dev stream, Stephen was talking about that's what gives you all that. That's what makes things fun. You have your most fun when you have this high challenge to get your rewards, and I'm like, yeah, for hardcore players, but not for casual players. That's not what is the most fun for me. I'd rather do stuff that is chill, and there are times that I enjoy having the adrenaline rush or whatever that is from defending a city, and it's mostly because I'm helping people defend something. I think it was like you get this rush from taking things from people or knowing that you're the only one to get, and I'm like, yeah, that's not what's giving me my rush. I don't get a rush knowing that I had to work hard to get this only thing and nobody else has it. I want the thing that I want when I want it. If I can get it, sure. But challenge and me being the only one, that's not part of my motivator.
I mean, would you be interested in something if it was like the King's Crown, for example? It's this one item that exists in the game. Whoever's wearing it, when they die, it drops, and then it randomly goes somewhere. And when you're wearing it, you are super powerful. but then you can automatically be aggroed. But you're super powerful and you won't lose anything when you die, except the crown. Would you, Diggs, if you saw that in a chest, would you don the crown? Would you arm up and go unleash your rage upon the peoples?
Am
Freely?
I going to have rage? I
Would
probably
you?
am not
I
going to
don't
have
know.
rage.
Would you just go out and it's like, oh, you want to mess with me? Well, fine, I'll slap you away because I'm more powerful now. But eventually, some group of people is gonna come through and try to knock it off of you. Is that the sort of thing you
I
would be
would not
interested?
have none of that would run through my mind at all. That
No,
would not
you
be a
wouldn't touch.
mindset.
You wouldn't touch the crown.
Oh, I might wear it, but that's not the reason that I would be wearing it. Like any of that other stuff that I might say, oh, that looks like a cool thing, or maybe it gives me a cool power and I might choose to wear it because I think it's cool. But all the other stuff that you attributed to it is not anything that would run through my mind or be appealing to me.
So you're going to be a big target while you're wearing it, and people are going to be coming at you. But you're just going to wear it and be like, "All right, let's do some dungeons."
I would wear it until I'm tired of wearing it. Yeah.
Why people PK and steal in games is probably a whole different show because it could be a quite lengthy discussion as to those motivations.
Well, that one wasn't necessarily like a PK and steal so much as that if an item exists that specifically functions in this way, there's only one of in the world. Like, would you mess with it, and then what would you do with it? So no, that makes sense. You just try it out just to try it out, and either it's fun or it's not.
But for me, that would be something. A power that I would want would probably be something that augments or accentuates my stealth. Something along that line, or it might do something for healing animals or healing the forest or something like that. Those would be the stuff that I'm looking for. And if it gives me the abilities that I'm looking for, then sure, I would put it on. And I might put it on realizing that people would attack me more or something until I'm tired of being attacked. And then I'd happily give it away because it isn't any fun. But because it makes me more powerful than other players and I can smack them around it's like when I was playing Warcraft 2, I think it was, at Activision 30 years ago. And people were telling me, hey, Diggs, step on the snake. And I was like, why am I going to step on the snake? Is it going to attack me? No. Then why do I want to kill it? Because it's fun. Why is killing a snake that's not going to attack me fun? I'm just going to ignore it and let it do its thing. I don't. But for some people, killing stuff is fun. And the better you can kill stuff, the happier they are. But that's not in my mindset. I'm a Care Bear.
To be fair, the part where you're squishing beetles in Diablo 2, that was fun. I enjoyed it because they made it really squishy and like you don't have to do it and it's just a sensory sort of thing. They're just crawling around. But yeah, you step on that bug, it goes squish and it makes a squishy sound.
No.
Kind of like, popping packing bubbles.
Diggs, you've already been warned. You need to learn to fight back because they're going to come after you.
Dance, just dance.
But
Diggs, you know how to dance.
On that note, that could be a service. Again, I don't know that I care. Come and kill me. You might get a lot of corruption too. But yeah, come and kill me.
I feel like this is maybe the equivalent when they say, well, gatherers should just hire PvP players. Like how many PvP players would be happy if when they wanted a new sword, they had to go with each and every gatherer, refiner, crafter to get all the items, refine all the items, craft all the items, like be a part of the process. Like they would hate that. So why, anyway.
Mm-hmm.
Well, all right, folks. It is after 9 o'clock, so I think we are going to probably call it quits here. And we will be back in a week. So everyone have a great week. And join us in Discord. We've had some fun conversations. Maybe we'll get back to that whole character level conversation that I know I'm right about and you're entirely wrong about. So, all right.
Later,
everyone
everybody.
be safe.